Americans don't do sorry. Here's why. Is that true? Americans don't apologize? I mean, obviously there will be some that apologize, and I would imagine that Americans apologize at the same rate that Europeans do and any other person. But Lawrence has spent a bunch of time in America now. He's been there for well over 10 years, so I mean he's probably got a lot of experience in this. Americans watching this, do you not apologize?
And he fell right over on his arse.
Action.
Hello, I'm Lawrence, and I'm on a quest to uncover all of the memos that Britain and America lost in the pond. And one of those memos pertains to apologies. Recently, I was at the hairdresser getting my hair cut and my beard trimmed, and in the process of that, I got an irritation on my neck where the razor had been. This isn't something that usually happens, and all is forgiven if you are watching. But there's something about that moment that stood out to me. My hairdresser, my American hairdresser, said, "Oh my God, Lawrence, I'm so sorry," but in an American accent. And I said, "It's fine. My job only requires me to go on camera in front of hundreds of thousands of people. Don't worry about it." But the thing that stood out to me is the fact that she said sorry. Because one major difference that I've noticed between living in Britain and living in the United States is that on this side of the pond, you hear that word less. And in this video, we're going to take a look at why that is. Subscribe.
Interesting. On an average day, Americans watching this, how many times would you say you apologize? Like, if it was your fault, would you apologize immediately, or are you quite reluctant to say sorry?
Subscribers of this channel will know that I make no apologies for the content that I put out, even though most of the time I should. And if you're not yet subscribed yourself, do that now. In the meantime, here's why Americans apologize less than British people. 200 years ago, when I was 18, I studied linguistics. I loved it because now I had an academic justification for the stupid shit that I said. And one of the things that I learned in depth and subsequently forgot about was politeness theory. What's politeness theory, Lawrence? I was doing that impolitely just for the humour. Well, politeness theory deals with the notion that we all carry a face. And I don't just mean this, I mean our self-esteem. So think of the term, I was trying to save face. And there are two types of face as posited by Brown and Levinson. They were the linguists that came up with politeness theory. And those two types are positive and negative face. And you might be thinking, Lawrence, this is all way too technical. Just tell it to me like I'm 5. Our positive face deals with the desire to be liked. And our negative face deals with our desire to not be impeded or bothered or interrupted. And in Britain, we tend to prioritize our negative face. In other words, we do our best not to impose on others. This is why I'll often...
Yes, this is true. Like, if you're at a Tesco grocery store, and, even if you're just trying to get an item from the shelf, like, even if you don't even touch the person, like, there's this overwhelming urge to apologize just for getting close to the other person. You'll be like, "Oh, sorry, mate." Like, it's, now that I think about it, like, nothing's been done. No harm has been done, but we still apologize for things like that. Yeah, why is that?
British people say things like, "I don't mean to be a pain, love, but could I borrow your umbrella?" That could impede the other person because they might need that umbrella because they live in Britain. And so British people go in there with that verbal acknowledgement that they might be impeding them, putting them out, by using phrases like, "I don't mean to be a pain." It's apologetic language before you've even really committed anything worth apologising for.
Exactly.
We'll sometimes go out of our way to commit a face-threatening act against a person's positive face, the desire to be liked, by using insulting language toward even our friends. "Stephen, you big twat, how are you doing?" This isn't something that happens very often in America. But that's not to say that Brits never try to save positive face. Like, "I'm sorry, mate, but that was bang out of order." In other words, that's a not very delicate attempt to save the other person's face, because while you are telling them that their actions were wrong, you're starting it with that softening word, sorry. Now, obviously, in this circumstance, it can be perceived as a sarcastic sorry or a redundant sorry. Americans, on the other hand, would not do that. I don't think I've ever heard an American start a sentence, "I'm sorry, but," unless they are genuinely apologetic. I think that...
Have I ever heard an American say sorry, but I think I've heard that, actually. Like, especially if the American wants to say something in disagreement to what the first person has said, I've heard people say, like, "I'm sorry, but I don't agree with you," in that way.
That's the big difference, is that we have all manner of contexts in which we can use the word sorry in Britain that don't necessarily connect with the notion of an apology, whereas in America, the word sorry, believe it or not, is usually reserved for apologies. What a novel idea. It doesn't mean that Americans won't insert other similar phrases that might offset that kind of attack to the positive face. You often hear Americans say, with all due respect, you're an asshole. At least that's the Americans I speak to. But the American priority is really toward positive face, the desire to be liked, whereas avoiding crossing that line into imposing on your negative face is not such a big deal here. I mean, I've said this before, you could be walking down the street and somebody says hi because they're trying to be nice. But in Britain, this is less common just due to that cultural belief that we don't infringe on people's privacy or privacy.
Which I think is a shame. Like, someone saying hello to me, just walking down the street would be like really nice. It's the acknowledgement, the greeting. I think that's great. Like, that kind of stuff. We should do more of that as a society.
Even if they are out in public. And this crossed my mind earlier when I was just scrolling through YouTube Shorts and an old Harry Enfield sketch came up. Harry Enfield is a comedian in Britain who had a comedy show, and in a sketch that was called something like Americans Visiting a British Restaurant. They walk in, these Americans, just waving at everyone in the restaurant saying, hey, good morning, how are you? An American wouldn't actually do that, or at least I don't think so. But it was just sort of playing up that stereotype that Americans will talk to anybody, sometimes without that regard to imposing on the negative face, because culturally they just don't have that as much here. Another good example is I'll be walking down the street with my wife, and if she sees a woman who's wearing a pair of heels that she likes, she says, give me those heels now. No, she doesn't do that. She says, oh my God, I love those shoes, but in an American accent. And the woman who...
Yeah, that kind of interaction, it might happen like in the evening after like drinking, British people, I think, are much more like Americans when alcohol has been consumed, because the inhibitions are gone. You can just let loose. Whereas typically a Brit is probably more reserved than an American. A lot more, they hold themselves in more.
His American responds back with, thank you, I got them at JCPenney for 30% off. And that's it, that's the conversation, and they just go their merry way. I must say, I don't think American blokes tend to do that. Excuse me, I love your tool belt, mate. Where'd you get? Never mind. As a British man living in America, I've spent years uncovering the subtle and sometimes not so subtle differences between our two countries. And if there's one thing that I've learned, it's that whether you're in Britain or the US, one thing remains constant. The internet is watching you. Yep, every time you browse the web, there's going to find a deal as good as this one, except through content creators like me, which is proof that I'm really important. But also that you should jump on this deal right now. Remember, head to nordvpn.com/pond to get your exclusive offer. The link is in my description below.
Tom Cruise.
A few years ago, I was just mindlessly scrolling the internet when I came across this story from the point of view of British actor and comedian Simon Pegg. Now, my Anglophile audience might know him from Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, or even Spaced, but he also has a role in the Mission Impossible series, which stars somebody called...
Yeah, he's one of the nerds. It's him and Ving Rhames. They're like the computer guys.
Thomas Cruise. Tom and Simon are actually friends in real life. And Mr. Pegg, when talking about Mr. Cruise, said he maintains his authority by never apologizing for his...
Wow. I mean, I think if I had a friend who never apologized, even when they were wrong, that would annoy me. It would probably annoy you too, I mean, come on. If you mess up, just say sorry.
His mistakes. He further goes on to say that if somebody corrects him, instead of saying sorry, Cruise will just say, yeah, and wink at me. I mean, He didn't even apologise to us all when he jumped up and down on that couch on Oprah. On Oprah's show, not on Oprah. And I imagine to an actor like Simon Pegg, who grew up in that same British sensibility that I did, that might seem either narcissistic or, as he says, a tool by which to maintain authority. I see it, though, as a potential example of this notion that you often hear in America, that apologies can be seen as a sign of weakness or
I don't know. Do you agree with that? Apologizing is a sign of weakness? I don't know. I look at it from another way. Being able to own up to something, I think, is a sign of strength.
an admission of blame. This is particularly true in business and leadership. Tom Cruise, in effect, is a businessman, somebody who considers himself a leader. And I remember when I worked for a business here in Chicago before I became a full-time YouTube sensation, there was one time when I completely messed up and I was late on a deliverable and I felt bad about it. So I actually went to the person who was overseeing that part of the project and I apologized to them and they were stunned. This was an American person. They just hadn't heard somebody utter the word sorry in the...
Wow. Really? Is it that rare? This is really a mind blower. So apologies in the workplace are rare in America.
Before. For me, it felt like I was hopefully displaying integrity by owning that mistake, but also to try to correct it. So you might be thinking, Lawrence, does all of this mean that British people care too much and Americans don't care at all? No, since I left Britain, I've also left behind those so-called redundant apologies. I think I've been influenced by the American way of doing things, the more direct approach to things. I no longer use phrases like, I'm sorry, but. I think that in some ways, Americans are onto something, because if you are using the word sorry, every other sentence...
It kind of weakens the words. Yeah, I agree with him there. Like, only say it if you mean it. That's what, I think I agree with the American outlook there.
I used to do in Britain. Sorry has the potential to become redundant when you are genuinely apologetic. It almost becomes meaningless at that point because you have a reputation for using the word sorry in places where you're not. On the other hand, do I think that apologizing shows weakness? No, I think it shows strength. In fact, that's what this colleague said to me. It takes a lot to admit that you have weaknesses, to say it out loud, because most of us, I don't know that we're actually capable of it. I mean, I'll be honest, most of the time I'm not capable of it. When you have this 700 odd thousand subscribers, it goes to your head. And so you don't feel like you need to apologize much. And I've just realized that's why Tom Cruise is the way he is. Let me know in the comments if you are sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the balance, the best way is probably somewhere in the middle. So a lot less of the British like over apologizing, for things, and maybe a bit less than the Tom Cruise like never apologizing. I think, both of those are not the way to go for me, at least. I think, if you mess up, if you clearly mess up, no harm in saying sorry. Or what do you think? Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.